This entire military is one cohesive, dedicated force. And the threats to our nations, they don't sleep. They're watching our every move. Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. They may be watching this right now. Our military should not be mistaken for a cable news gabfest show. We don't care what you look like. We don't care who you voted for, who you worship, what you worship, who you love. It doesn't matter if your dad left you millions when he died or if you knew who your father was. We have been honed into a machine of lethal moving parts that you would be wise to avoid if you know what's good for you. We will not be intimidated. We will not back down. We don't want war. But if you want war with the United States of America, there's one thing I can promise you, so help me God. Someone else will raise your sons and daughters.
Opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Well, here we are. Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk on Dozier Show. Let's Talk Edition right here on NBR Radio. Let's see. Make sure you go to the website, nbradio.us, and check out all the other podcasts and talk shows of my brothers and sisters streaming right here on this beautiful platform, giving veterans a voice. And that is something that we are going to discuss today. I do not have a guest. So I felt it was time for me to just, share some things, just one-on-one, you and I right here, about some work I've been doing for myself. And I really just believe it's that time, right? With so much going on in the world, all these systems that are in place. And then where are we at inside of all of this? Right. And so what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to speak for other veterans. That's not how I operate. But I ask you that if you are a veteran, one of my brothers and sisters in arms, that you use this conversation to relate. If you are not a veteran, you're still included in this conversation because I want you to hear for yourself in relating this conversation. As I shared many times that I was taught as a young soldier that when it comes to particular things in the world now, that civilians aren't going to understand you. And we're trained that, we're taught that, we're talked to about that civilians are not going to understand. And I don't even know when it clicked for me, but I do know that that is something that I live from, that I lived from that conversation. I mean, I lived from all of those military conversations because that was who I became. So when you recognize what you're living from, I think, guess what? That might be an opportunity to discover what those things are. So we're going to play our public service announcement, and then I'm going to get right into this conversation. I'm not going to keep you too long. We're here for an hour, maybe less. But I'm just going to share my own story. And this is for, I said this show is for my grandchildren, right? So you are listening to me talk to my grandchildren as I'm talking to you, as you're listening, because I want them to have something to take away as their grandfather when they get a little bit older, that if they happen to find this, or my daughters share this episode with them and this stays online, maybe I'll download it too and keep it, that my grandchildren will have an opportunity to see and hear their grandfather talk about some things that are important for not just my generation, but my grandfather's generation, my dad's generation, and their grandfather's generation. So this is very important, because also if you do decide to be a guest on the Farron Dozier Show, the Trench Talk edition, these are the kind of talks we're going to have. We don't do superficial talks here on this topic. You get to share your life before, during, and after service at whatever level you want. You may not go as deep as I'm going to go, but I've had people over the last, I've been doing Trench Talk since 2013. I've had some shows where people opened up to a lot of personal things in their life and in their military career. So I'm going to be that example today. We're going to get this topic going. Again, this is the Farron Dozier Show. This is the Trench Talk edition. And we're going to play this PSA and get right into these topics, because I don't want to miss anything. And I'm sharing from my heart. I'm sharing from my own personal experiences. I'm not speaking for veterans. I'm not speaking for the military. I'm speaking from how God has allowed me to find my peace in His Word and in His life. This PSA is brought to you by Comigo. For those veterans like myself who don't want to use drugs, I've been down that road, did not like it. Sometimes our breathing can help, right? So there are devices and there's things out there that you can control, maybe your anxiety or your stress or whatever that you're dealing with. There are things out there that are holistic, that are not medicated, and this is not. This is just a device that helps you control your breathing if you choose. And if you're, again, a civilian or not in the military, hey, anxiety, stress, that's a human being function. That's a human being flaw that I don't think anybody escapes if they tell the truth, right? So this is Comigo.
Some of us still carry the burden of battle. It threatens to drown us in our everyday lives. In battle, we had our weapons and combat gear to keep us safe, to keep us confident. But when we returned home, we were not armed with weapons and gear to cope with our own minds. I was lucky to find my combat gear, my mental weapon, and it's called Comigo. Comigo is a drug-free device that allows you to achieve calm in less than 3 minutes in moments of anxiety, stress, anger, panic, or insomnia, not with medication, but rather by activating the parasympathetic nervous system through breathing regulation and multisensory stimulation. A recent study has shown that Comigo decreases PTSD and anxiety levels in veterans. helping those who are suffering and having a long-lasting effect. Visit Calmago.com to learn how you can get Calmago through the VA or with a special veterans discount code.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Farron Dozier Show, Trench Talk Edition, right here on MB Radio. That's right, MB Radio. Make sure you go get the app too. MB Radio has an app as well. I'm actually looking at it right now on my phone. I'm checking to see, making sure the show is on and make sure everything is live and going on. You can do a lot with that app. Listen to all the episodes here from your device. So if you're not in your car or you're not by your computer, grab that device and get the app for MB Radio. All right, so we're gonna start this topic off. My sharing is from a space of before, during, and after military service, right? And so let's talk about before. I ask guests, what's going on in life before the military. Who's Farron as a child growing up, and we're gonna go there, right? That's the before. So who Farron was a very emotional child. Loved his mother, more so loved his grandmother, and was able to, I guess you would say shy. I heard shy a lot as a child. I heard that Farron is shy. He's quiet, and I was told stories by my mom that I would go places with her, and that I would just sit in her lap and I would just watch the children play and whatever that was. And so I was kind of standoffish, kind of shy, I guess you could say. But really, looking back, grew up in a very loving environment, a Christian Baptist environment from my grandparents. My childhood friends, today looking back, we had a great time in the 70s. And all these experiences from the 80s, 90s, I had a good time. Now, the emotional part, that's where we get to talk about how it impacted who Farron was on an emotional level. As I tell you, my environment was actually very great. I was taken care of. I didn't want it for nothing. However, as children, when we grow up and we don't understand what's happening in our environment, sometimes we don't see it that way in the moments. Sometimes we don't never see it, and people die without even discovering that their life was actually really great, taken care of. So for me, there were some episodes, there were some things that I made up. I can admit to you that I made them up as a child. They were not the truth. They were the truth, but they wasn't. It was my truth, but they wasn't the truth. But I can only tell you that from today because I did the work around those conversations. And growing up, I can tell you, before I had really language to talk, there was a transition that I felt like I was disconnected from my mom as a 2-year-old. Now, in the moment of a 2-year-old, again, the brain is developing, but a 2-year-old, I think I could barely talk. I think I knew some words at 2. But I can tell you, looking back on my emotional state, how I felt. And how I say that I was disconnected with love from my mom because of a transition of living by my grandparents from 2 years old to 8. Now, I'm going this far back because as we get into the forward conversations, I want you to be able to look and see in your own life, right? So I'm asking you to look in your own life and see if you see things like this for yourself. But I love my mom, but I was also emotionally disconnected from her. And I got connected to my grandmother, and I lived there for those 8 years I went to kindergarten, first grade, second grade, over there with my grandparents. My mom would pick me up. I remember that. I would cry when she would pick me up to go back to mama's house. You know, these are stories that I have that I will be sharing in another conversation. But I want you to get that at 2 years old, I was disconnected from my mom. I say disconnected with love because I understand today of what I was dealing with as a child. Now, I can tell you, growing up in my environment with my grandparents, like I said, looking back today, awesome. In the moments of time as a child, I really didn't know what was going on. I knew that I was old enough to play with my friends in the neighborhood. Sometimes my grandparents would say they were bad kids. You can't play with them. Don't play with them because they were doing bad stuff. Well, we know as a child, all that makes you want to do is just go find out and play with them anyway, right? Or you play with them at school, but then you can't play with them in the neighborhood. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, so I remember a lot of times I'd have to sit on the porch. I couldn't go outside and play because they were outside playing. But they were still my friends. Nevertheless, we played football, tackle football, sideline pop, throw up, tackle, whatever, baseball, hockey. That was the environment. That was the 70s. It was way different in the 70s than it is today. I can tell you in the second grade, I had some issues in school. I could read, but I remember making some decisions in my second grade class. For me, my eyes would not stay on the paper, and I would read with my finger or a ruler. And I remember one day my classmates laughed at me because I was reading with my finger. And I sound like the cat in the hat. And then he went to the store like that. And I can tell you in that moment that I told myself I will never raise my hand again, and I will never read out loud. Now, that is a conversation that lived with me, I can tell you, for 40 years before I discovered that decision. I can tell you the decision I discovered about my mom at 2 years old was just recently. Like last week. So that's 52 years that I felt like I was disconnected from my mom. And then 40 years of a decision that I made around my second grade class. But there was another one, because I'm going to ask you as a guest, how was your relationship with your mom? How was your relationship with your dad? And sometimes, silently, people don't want to talk about that. Sometimes people don't want to say what they was dealing with as a child. And it's okay. I can tell you at 5 years old, I made a decision that my dad didn't love me. So if we tell the truth, there are some things that we deal with as children that we pretend maybe as adults that everything was fine and everything was fine. But where the work is at is to be able to tell the truth to yourself. So imagine 2 years old, I'm disconnected with love from my mom. 5 years old, my dad doesn't love me, which I'll talk about that in another topic. 6 years old, not going to raise my hand, and I'm not going to read out loud, especially in front of my peers. Wow, that's 3 decisions already. How does that happen for a child? How does that happen for any of us? Maybe because that's what the brain is designed to do, protect us. So can you imagine going from a open free to wonder about life, ask questions, why, all day long. Asking questions for no reason at all, just because you want to ask questions because you're learning and you want to know why. And then to one day make a decision that I'm not going to be this kind of person anymore, that I'm not going to do these kind of things anymore. Yeah, we're going to touch on that later. And then let's talk about the transition as a child at 8 years old. There was another transition that I went back to live with my mom after she got married. And now I'm uprooted out of that environment of my grandparents for 6 years, 8 years, 6 years, to now back with my mom and my new baby sister and my stepfather in a whole nother environment. Now we laugh and we may think that that's not such a big deal. I mean, yes, that was what they were supposed to do. Come and get me. But what does that do to a child? You know, we talk about, you know, kindergartners like my grandson and 5 years old, and you take them to kindergarten, we drop them off and they cry like crazy when you tell them to go into the classroom by themselves. You know, that cry. How many of us had that cry like that, but silently? How many of us cried like that, but without it coming out of our mouth and saying something? The suffer in silence cry. See, because all of us went through that transition at some point. All of us went to kindergarten. All of us had to go to a daycare where you, the new person on the block, or you're the new kid in the school. All of us did that. But do we glaze over that and make it seem like, oh, you know, that's what you're supposed to do. He'll be okay. She'll be okay. But do you understand transition and change? Do you understand transition and change is emotional? Do you think why that child is crying, going into daycare or kindergarten? Or is it just learned behavior? For some of us, that was another fracture, another wound, another emotional trauma. And I had that one too. So I'm disconnected by my mom at 2. By 5, my dad doesn't love me. By 6, my peers, I'm not raising my hand in front of my peers and reading out loud no more. At 8, I'm in transition and change out of an environment that leads to an experience of being abandoned. Now, I wasn't abandoned. How long did it take me to discover the abandonment issue? Well, how about 38 years when I discovered it? And how about another 44, 45 years before I actually got free from it? Now, this is all life before service. And I'm saying this because there is a conversation out there, right? And we talk about PTSD in the military. We talk about trauma. I mean, it's a huge topic. Today, mental health is a huge topic today. It's important. But I'm talking about these childhood experiences for a reason. And the reason is because there's a conversation called complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Complex. CPTSD. This is before service. This is what's going on in Farron's life as a child. Great. Again, I had a great life. I had everything that I needed. A lot of times I had everything that I wanted. Sometimes I didn't get what I wanted. I got what I needed. But that's all of us as a child. Like, none of us escapes that. However, in this conversation about complex post-traumatic stress disorder. These are some of the things as a child, as children in our environment growing up that we say to ourselves. And sometimes no one told us this. Sometimes these are things that we've told ourselves. That the brain, if you understand the machine in the brain, these are some automatic, natural conversations that the brain has that is designed to survive life. And for some people, they grow up in an environment where they tell themselves, I feel like I don't have a right to exist. Now, can you imagine a child telling themselves in an environment that they're being raised in or growing up in that they feel like I don't have a right to exist as a child? How about I bother people just by being alive? How about I wish I had never been born? You ever said that to yourself? How about this one? I am a burden. How about I feel invisible? How about I am nothing? How about I don't matter? How about I will never be enough? How about I'm alone in the world? How about my feelings don't matter? How about I can never get enough hugs? How about I am a bottomless pit of needs? How about that? Anybody ever said those to themselves? How about everyone else's needs are more important than mine? How about that? How about if I ask for help, others will accuse me of attention seeking? You ever had that one? Or lastly, others are busy and don't have time for me. Now imagine if you tell the truth, you ain't got to tell the truth to me, you ain't got to put it in the chat. Imagine you just have one of those, just one. I'm not saying you got to have 5 of them. I'm just saying, imagine you grew up with just one of those. Imagine you have just one. Pick one, any one, and then live your life from that thought about yourself. Not anybody telling you that. Or maybe you do have some evidence that somebody said that you were stupid, or you're dumb, or you're whatever. You know how we talk, you know how people talk to us. You know how our peers are. Can you imagine growing up in the back of your mind that says that I'm a burden? Can you imagine what that feels like? And then to grow up with that in your young age, in your transitions, that I'm a burden, in your school? Let's go there. But you have to be able to tell yourself the truth about that. It might be something different from this list. Who knows? But imagine I grew up with lacking a mother's love. My dad doesn't love me. And by the time I'm in 2nd grade, I'm not going to raise my hand and I'm not going to read out loud. And then by 3rd grade, I'm abandoned by my mom. Oh, and by the way, I'm the new kid in school. So now I got to have this anxiety of making new friends all over again. See, this is the life before service. As a child, I had a great life. Emotionally, there were some things that I was silently dealing with that I didn't even know as a child. You see, children, yes, our children are young. We were all children. If you listen to this as an adult, you were somebody's child. And sometimes we grow up in our environments and we don't get a chance to say what we feel, to say what's going on with us because our environment doesn't allow that child to be heard or talked or talk or whatever that is. But there is a conversation around complex post-traumatic stress disorder that I don't know if anyone escapes it. Does anyone escape that? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think anyone escapes these. But you have to figure out what yours is for yourself first. It's easy to say, oh, you got mama issues, you got daddy issues. Of course. That's not a cliche. That's real life. But as I'm talking to you from my life before, during, and after service, this is before service. So how do we deal with this before service? Because we're talking about post-traumatic stress disorder in the military. We're talking about right now complex post-traumatic stress disorder from our environment. So yes, I had a great life. Everything I needed, everything I wanted, just about. I know I wanted some more shoes and stuff like that. Didn't get it, whatever. But that's not the key. I'm talking about the emotional part of life. And I felt like that I was abandoned. I felt like my dad didn't love me. And they were around. My mom was around. My dad was around. That transition from elementary to middle school. That transition from moving from my grandparents' house to my mom's apartment. Those are emotional transitions. I talked about going to kindergarten and how that child cries because they don't want to go to school for the first time in their life. Those are the conversations we're talking about for the before military experience. I've got you up to 8 years old. Now by 8 years old, I feel like I'm abandoned because I'm now at this apartment by myself. They called us latchkey kids. I was a latchkey kid of 1978. And I had to keep this key. I had this key around my neck with this string because I had to use that key to get into the apartment. So I feel like I'm abandoned by my mom, but also I got to be responsible with this key. Now, it took me until I just actually got free from that key last year. So from 8 years old until 53. So you could do the math there. That key of being responsible, how that played out in my life. Right? Because what I'm talking about is these emotional decisions that we make that our brain creates for us to survive these moments of pain as a child, they're natural. I don't think anybody escapes them. And again, if you just grew up with I'm a burden, one is enough. How would you grow up in your environment silently thinking that I'm a burden? How would you grow up in your environment thinking that I feel like I don't have a right to exist? And you go off to school. How do you grow up with the thought to yourself that I feel invisible? Like, do we think about those? Now, I can tell you, all these stories that I'm talking from before military service, those were always already in my head. There would be times that 2-year-old story would pop in my mind. There was times that the 5-year-old story would pop in my mind. There are times that the 6-year-old story would pop in my mind. There was times that the 8-year-old story would pop in my head. And I would think like, why do I remember that? Why is that such a distinct memory? Why do I remember? Why is my thought thinking? Why is that thought coming from? Why do I feel this emotional distress in my body from a thought? But I never had the tools or never even knew that I could grab that thought. and get a hold of it and put it through and filter it through some principles. I never even knew that was possible. So the life before service, it plays a huge part of life during service and after service. So I left you off at the 8-year-old decision. Now let's go to the 11-year-old decision, where I was embarrassed and felt shame because of my mom's car broke down. Again, I'm 11 and I have no concept of what it is to have a car or own a car. I like playing with toys and cars, but I had no concept of what it was for a car to break down and have to go to a mechanic shop and have it fixed. And then you can replace it and drive it and fix it and drive it. But I can tell you that emotional part of that embarrassment of having to walk to the store one day with my stepfather, having to pay with food stamps, because we knew what food stamps was back then. That means you was kind of poor or you didn't have any money, and so you had to have government food stamps to buy food. Oh, and in school, you had to have lunch tickets and be on a lunch program so that you could eat lunch at school. Now, you don't think that was some shame there already? Some embarrassment there already? So how did I know that when my stepfather paid for that food at the grocery store and I'm watching him pull out money and it's food stamps? And the little fracture that I felt standing there next to him with food stamps. And then we pushed the grocery cart home. Now, I grew up with my grandparents that grocery cart doesn't leave the parking lot. It's supposed to stay at the store. But my grandfather, because we had all these groceries, my stepfather, he's pushing the cart home now on a busy street. And we crossed the street and we're walking up a busy street. Now, what is the mind of an 11-year-old who's looking at this cart like, why are we pushing this cart? This should be back at the store. By the way, we paid with food stamps. I'm a little embarrassed about that. And now I'm embarrassed because all these cars are driving by and they're probably looking at us saying, look, they don't have no car. And I can remember that my mom's car is at the house because it's sitting there broken down and then we can't drive it. At 11. There was a decision that I made in that moment about who Farron needed to become to survive that moment of shame and embarrassment. That's the life of an 11-year-old. And that story is coming soon as well. Now, there's a few more that I want to touch before I take this commercial break here. What I learned about the car after the fact, I don't know, that was 11. So I think I discovered that decision also in my probably about 48 or 49. So 30 something years I lived with that decision about the embarrassment and shame. I discovered it. Didn't really get free from it, but I discovered where it was coming from. Put it that way. That when that story popped up in my head, I grabbed it with those principles and unraveled it and saw, oh my goodness, no wonder I had 5 cars and a motorcycle. No wonder I was embarrassed to walk down the street to the grocery store. No wonder I was afraid to go to places by myself because I felt like people was looking at me, like look at him laughing at me because I'm by myself. Shame and embarrassment. That I couldn't even go places by myself, that I couldn't even walk to the grocery store down the street. So that was only not long ago, right? And one of the next ones was we moved from that area to another spot. No, take that back. So before that, I went to a junior high school in the Valley from a magnet program. 7th grade, that was off the chain. But that transition from 8th grade, 7th grade to 8th grade, because we moved from that apartment complex up like the Jeffersons, we got a little bit more money. So the food stamps is gone. We got a little bit more money. So we moving up, we going north toward Hollywood. So we up close to Hollywood on Melrose over there. Nice house. But the transition now is I got to go from this this middle school to another middle school, or back then we called it junior high school. Junior high to another junior high. Now, again, I'm the new kid on the block again. Another transition and change again. And how do I make friends now? How do I make friends today at that moment? So I remember walking to school. I remember going through the gate, and in Bancroft, there was a gate on the side. And then as you walked in past the building on the right, it was courts, just a bunch of basketball courts. So I walked into school. I went and stood by the basketball courts, saw some guys playing. This is like 7:30 in the morning. And I start playing basketball. I can tell you today that that's where my identity happened, to survive that experience of loneliness and that transition of who I get to be today. Well, I made friends playing basketball. I also lost my girlfriend playing basketball in junior high school. That's another story. Life of a 14-year-old. So again, this before service conversation is so important, because we have to be able to look in our life and tell the truth to ourselves to find out what's going on before I joined the military. What had me join the service? We ain't even got that far yet. I'm still in junior high school. By the time that 14-year-old decision made that I'm not going to be vulnerable and have to defend myself in relationships with a woman, it was a wrap. It was a wrap. Because now I'm going into 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade with how many emotional fractures since 2 years old. Now, I can tell you it was no wonder I joined the military. It was no wonder I joined the military. But the points that I'm making in this first part of before service is these are real. These are real. We pretend like everything's fine when we're suffering silence. We pretend like there's no shame and embarrassment, but there is. We suffer in silence. We don't have the courage or the confidence in some areas to speak up. People label you as a hypocrite. They label you as a player, as a cheater. Like, we label people all these things. Shy, bullies, you name it. We label one another so easy without trying to find out what's going on with that person first. Now, depending on your background, I can tell you today that yes, this is a real conversation, and it's a spiritual conversation too, for me, biblically. So are interested in that conversation, that could be another topic we can talk about. But the Bible are passages and stories about life. A lot of our government laws came from Moses and the Ten Commandments. A lot of the passages that you read in the Bible show you who those people were before, during, and after, and how they developed in the Word. So if society can use the Ten Commandments, the laws, and they are used by our government system, why are we not using all of it? Well, guess what? I would imagine a lot of the mental health stuff comes out of there. I know a lot of personal development talks come out of there. And who was the best example of that? Was Jesus Christ. He taught us, he showed us, he shows us who we get to be as people and what it takes to live this life with power and strength. Is you got to renew your mind. And at 50, I had to go and renew my mind. At 40, I got introduced into some education that got me on this path. I did take cognitive behavior through the VA. I did take grievance courses through the VA. I paid for some of my own courses out of my own pocket the last 14 years, except for the first ones that my friends donated to me and paid for. That's how I got involved. They paid for that first curriculum for me. And then I had to go find God for myself. If you're concerned about your eternal life, then the Bible is where you go. But this is all before service. I just gave you almost 40 minutes of what life was like before service. Very emotional. Silently, though. But I had to go figure that out. I had to be willing to do that work. And a lot of people aren't willing. See, a lot of us know what's going on before service. A lot of us know what was going on in our childhood. A lot of us know how we feel. But some of us aren't willing to take a look. When we talk about PTSD, that's after military service. And then you feel right back to for some of the childhood experiences or that never actually got healed from. But in this piece here, life before service, it's a lot. And today, our children are going through the same thing. Why do we think that our children aren't dealing with the same things that we went through? Why are we not telling the truth to our children about the things that we went through, of how we felt about our parents, how we felt about our friends? Like we say it, right? But we talk about it, but we don't talk from it. I'm asking because I've learned that my freedom came from talking from it. I was willing at the point of my ideations of suicide and life is over after service, we're going to get there. But all that came back. It just takes one. Can you imagine growing up thinking that I'm a burden? How do you think the trajectory of your life is going to go in your phases of life if that's silently in your heart? But we have to be able to tell the truth to yourself first. That's my point. So I have a couple. I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna really try this to see if this works. I picked a couple of songs to go with my life before service. I pray that this plays, but let me see if this works. So I'm gonna bring up the playlist right here, right? So this is my Spotify. We're gonna go to the Spotify track right here. Now this one, I was a Star Wars, I grew up in the Star Wars age, and as I thought about songs that remind me of growing up, and especially around the military mindset and things like that, I felt like Another One Bites the Dust was something that represented my military experience as a child. I did play with Army men. I played with a lot of toys. I played with Star Wars toys. I played with all kind of little Army figures and characters and Supermans and all the little figurines, the plastic ones that didn't even move. Like, I played with all those. But when Star Wars came out, I felt like that should be the track that represented Star Wars. Let me see if this is gonna play. Yeah, I don't think it's gonna play. Let's see. This is just a little bit of my childhood right here. Oh, it's not gonna play. Well, ain't that about something? Well, anyway, that is Another One Bites the Dust. For those of you who are looking at it, it played earlier. I don't know why. Let me see. Stop sharing screen. How about we do that? How about we go present? We're gonna try it again. Windows there. Share. Okay, let's see. Another One Bites the Dust. No, I don't hear it. You don't hear it? I don't hear it either. Well, at least it was a nice try. But these are the list of songs that I created from my childhood. It was Another One Bites the Dust. I'll tell you, another one is Human by the Killers. That was more of my junior high school kind of, the lyrics to that. Kind of just like, kind of gloomy, trying to make sense of why I feel the way I feel. So that was the Killers, Human. But yeah, I just wanted to be able to share this first piece of, again, if you're a guest one day, you don't have to go that deep. But when I'm asking my questions about life before service, that's what I'm looking at. I like to hear people's experiences. Sometimes a question or a song can bring up a memory that's very distinct, and you're like, wow, that took me back. Or it forces you to think about, how was it growing up in your environment? How was it? How was the relationship with your mom? How was your relationship with your dad? It's like sometimes it takes that. So before I play this PSA, I want to just say again, thanks for listening in to the Farron Dozier Show. This is the Trench Talk edition. Life before, during, and after service has been the conversation before. Was my before service. So I want to play two things for you. I want you to hear Caldwell share about his life. He is a Korean era veteran. He's my mentor. He has a mental health education that I have taken, and I'm working with him around it. He's 90 right now, 91 next month, and he has trusted me that when he passes, that I will continue this conversation. And so I'm the only qualified trainer for his education right now. But I want to play his conversation as a Korean era veteran, as a child whose grandparents were slaves. And this is the curriculum that he started in the 1950s. So I'm going to play this one first, and then we're going to play one around veterans. But this is my mentor. This is my guy, Caldwell Williams. Take a listen.
The most compelling social need of humans is to belong. All four of my grandparents were born slaves. My father's father, he was 7 years old and sold away from everything and everybody he knew. He never again saw any member of his family. My father, he was born in 1884. His mother had died in childbirth, and he raised himself from age 8. The sheriff came with his posse, took my father and my oldest brother and beat them. My father died with scars on his back from that beating. If the sheriff puts you in jail in a Jim Crow South, where do you turn to seek justice? I love school. It became a source of me finding myself. When I had graduated from UCLA in 1957 and was never even able to get an interview, no Jews, no Negroes, no Hispanics, no Orientals need apply. Now what do I do? Boy, you add color to our faculty. That's all we're interested in. All the other counselors were instructed to give me their failing seniors, dopers, rebels, suicidals. Listening to 12th graders who were not going to graduate, they told me what was going on in their lives. I discovered that I had something to offer people that I thought had everything. Word was already out on the campus that the skinny black dude was cool. I got all these kids who want to talk to me, and I don't have enough time to see them. I think I might be able to see everybody if I saw them in groups. Individual psychotherapy on a couch was the only method. Skinny black dude wanted to do groups? You can't do that, because it doesn't exist. To hell with them, let's do it anyway. Parents want to know, what are you doing to bring about this reaction in my kid? I've been sending my kids to the best psychiatrist in Southern California, and this hasn't happened. This shit works. Developing adolescents without narcotics is a radical new national idea. Oh, you can't do that. Alternative school that includes sensitivity to the mental health needs of our students. This is too big for you. Would you be willing to train my managers? Yeah. Who's Caldwell Williams? He hasn't published anything. 22 Iraq-Afghan veterans committing suicide every day. I think I know who these young people are. Mr. Williams, you don't want to touch this. You don't know who we are, Mr. Williams. And I said, yes, I know who you are. Maybe you don't know who you are. Did your parents encounter racism? Oh my gosh, yes. How about your grandparents? Oh my, even worse. Then how did we get here? Someone persisted and prevailed in spite of. I would assert that no less is required of us.
So I share that to say it's our turn, right? At some point when we grow up and you get to this certain age and you look back and maybe you don't have a great relationship with your mom and dad, or maybe one of those parents weren't there. Some people think that both parents are there and the child should grow up in a great environment. Well, sometimes both parents are there and that child still grows up disconnected. Why? Because there's a natural break in communication between that child and that parent. Natural. That's why I said, does anyone escape it? I don't know. If we tell the truth. So it's my turn, right? I had to take responsibility for my life at 40 years old. I had to go back and ask my parents for forgiveness. I didn't wait till they came to me for my childhood and how I felt I was treated or wasn't treated. I went to them to ask them to forgive me for my behavior. And not everybody has the confidence or the courage to do that. But if you're willing to tell the truth on how you treat your parents, what does that look like? At some point, at some age, we have to take responsibility for our behavior, for our life, and not blame or be the victim of our environment. Or think we are. Remember, because I'm telling you, all the stuff that I shared with you this first hour was stories that I made up. That when I told the truth to myself, no one told me that. My own mind told me those stories. My own mind. There's a lot of education. There's child development courses. There's personal development courses. There's mental health classes. There's all kinds of conversations. Go study the brain science. If you understand memory patterns, perception patterns, and action patterns, you're going to be like, for real? Like, that's not even me? Yeah, when you get up and brush your teeth and take a shower and get dressed, you ain't even got to be there. That's your memory patterns already. Imagine we already always listen to somebody in a particular way, because that's how we filter conversations through these emotional states. You got to take a look for yourself, though. So I wanted this first episode to be about the before service. I'm painting this picture. When I come back next week, you're going to get into life during service. But this life before service, we talk about complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Complex, that means that's in your environment. And if you grew up with just one of those, just one, I discovered 10 decisions that I made in my life. 10. I'm talking about one can take you off track. One. And as an advocate for sickle cell trait, we're going to get into that next episode. I can hear people, have you ever heard somebody say that they're the black sheep of the family? That's a key indicator for me. Like, we describe it in many ways. People talk about, oh, I'm the black sheep, or I'm the middle child, or I'm nobody, whatever. Again, if you grow up with, I feel like I don't have a right to exist as a child, as a teenager, if you grew up as a teenager or as a child, as I bother people just by being alive, if you grew up as a child or a teenager, I wish I'd never been born. Do you know some people really say that to themselves? You know, people really talk to themselves with these conversations. That I'm a burden, that I feel invisible, that I'm nothing, that I don't matter, that I will never be enough, that I am alone in the world. My feelings don't matter. I can never get enough hugs. I'm a bottomless pit of needs. Everyone else's needs are more important than mine. If I ask for help, others will accuse me of an attention seeking, and others are busy and don't have time for me. Now, you grew up with one of those, just one, in your child, in your toddler age, or your elementary school age, or your middle school age, or your high school age. By high school, it's a wrap. By high school, you've got probably, I don't know, I had 2 years old, I had 5-year-old, I had 6-year-old, I had 8-year-old, I had 11-year-old, I had 14-year-old. I had 6 by the time I got to high school. I had 6 emotional fractures by the time I got to high school. That's 16. But why can't we tell the truth to ourselves and figure those out? What is that? That's my life before service. That's my life before service. That's my life before military service. And other than that, my life was great. Looking back as an adult, dealing with those situations, becoming free and not attached, and learning of where those thoughts came from and those behaviors came from, and taking 100% responsibility for my life, no longer blaming my parents, no longer blaming my environment, no longer blaming the system. Like, I got free from those. I understand them. And if you watch Caldwell's video, that's what he teaches. He's been teaching for 60 plus years. I got one more. This one is going to be for those, or for my subject. If you be a guest, we're going to talk about during service. Now, I spent 24 years in the Army, most of my life. And I got out not by choice from a medical issue. But my career, I joined at 19. Man, I had a blast. I do remember my brain clicking over from that 19-year-old teenager to a soldier. It was about 3 weeks in boot camp, and we did a bunch of maneuvers that day. We was low crawling. We had the M16 training. There was a lot of stuff going on that day. And I just remember I was on the top bunk. I just remember after taking a shower, sleeping in my PTs. So when I got up at 4 a.m, I was already dressed. So I slept in my PTs. And I just remember looking up at the ceiling one night, just like, man, like, what am I doing here? And then all of a sudden, my brain clicked. And from that day forward, it was a routine. It was a job. The mindset turned on, and it's never turned off. 1989. And you hear our brothers and sisters say, they teach us how to turn it on, but not how to turn it off. I'm going to save most of this for next week's episode for my during service. But what I learned and I walked away with today, after peeling off a lot of these layers during service, is that I never thought about dying. I never thought that if I put myself in the service, that the guarantee that the military could offer me was that I would die. That I could die. I never thought about that. I never thought that I joined the service of giving my life to death. Now, maybe some people don't look at it that way. I know for me, that's how I looked at it after service. It's like I joined the military. I actually had given my life to death. And I recognize that because in that transition just a few years ago, I gave my life to Christ. So if I could give my life to death for this country, why can't I not give my life to Christ for my eternal life? But that's just something I had to deal with, that I wanted. And one thing that we teach in our curriculum for veterans, around veterans, suicide ideations, and children, about life, I haven't mentioned it yet, but it's objectification. We teach it as objectification. And I want you to hear this before I play this clip. You hear these soldiers share their stories that the brain is so powerful. Your brain, your mind is so powerful that it can objectify another human being from being a person to a terrorist, or from a person to a suspect, or from a person to a black person, or from a person to a white person, or from a person to an Asian, or from a Clipper fan to a Laker fan, or from a Padres fan to a Dodger fan. And in the midst of that objectification, we can kill one another. We can kill one another in those spaces of objectification. Because we're trained, I was trained at 19 years old to objectify another human being to a terrorist, and then we trained to kill terrorists. As a police officer, they're trained to objectify a human being as a suspect. Our environment teaches us to objectify another person as a white person, or a Mexican, or a Hispanic, or Oriental, or however your environment taught you to describe that other person. And then you talked about that person from what the world says about that person. We objectify other human beings because they wear glasses. And then we talk to them as people talk about people with glasses. You have sports fans who have killed another person in the parking lot or at a stadium over a team that they don't even own because they have on the jersey though. And this is my team. And because you have on a Raiders jersey or a Lakers jersey or a Padres jersey, I can kill you based off of your jersey. You're not a person to me. You're an opponent. You're in opposition. Oh, you on that block? I'm on this block. So now you're an enemy because you're on that block. Like that's how powerful that brain is. And that's so deep rooted in our society that we label it as racism. We label it as white supremacy. Like we label it as all these other things, but inside of those labels are people. We even label the government system. Well, there's people that run that system. That government system don't run itself. So athletes deal with this. Police officers, it's a human flaw, as I said earlier. What's yours? That's my question. Sometimes we label ourselves. In that life before service, what have you labeled yourself? I'm shy. I'm this. I'm not good enough. I'm not worth it. I'm not smart enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm too fat. I'm this. I'm black. I can't. Like, what are all those labels that you labeled yourself, that you objectify yourself with? And then you live from that diminished experience of what the world talks about you or who you say that you are, not who you say you are. That's all life before service, before we put that uniform on, before that thing that drives us to join that branch of service. We don't talk about that part. At least I haven't seen it. I've been doing talk shows for 14 years. And I'm still new at it. I don't have it all figured out either. But I'm only sharing you from my life experience, from what I discovered about myself, and I know I'm not by myself. So when we objectify another human being into a terrorist, we're trained. That's all of our training. That's all of our training. And for some of our brothers and sisters who actually went to war and experienced that, that's a whole nother conversation that I can't even have with you. I'm not a combat veteran, but we all train as we gonna fight. And so the during service conversation next week, we're going to talk about some of that from a person who didn't get to go overseas, but wanted to go overseas, who tried to get deployed and couldn't get deployed. So I have one more video, then we're going to get out of here. This one is this is Caldwell. This is after what you saw in the beginning of that first video. 60 years he's been doing mindfulness and mental health talks. And then he came out of retirement around 2015 because he saw that his curriculum could help veterans. And this is what he discovered for our veteran community.
We veterans came home eager to continue with our civilian lives, only to find ourselves enmeshed in dysfunctional pathologies that erode confidence, dampen spirits, and lead too many of us to self-destruction.
One of the toughest points of my life was I had a really bad mental breakdown. It was between what happened overseas to losing a friend who committed suicide when we came back to decisions I've made during my lifetime and not being able to be athletic anymore, not being able to run anymore. Just a lot of things with the anxiety and everything else that happened, to a point where when they pulled me over, I couldn't hang myself because my rope was in my trunk, and I couldn't cut myself as hard as it was. I tried, couldn't do it. So I had about 200 pills I brought from a CVS store. It was, so I ended up taking all the pills, and I woke up in a hospital bed, handcuffed with a tube down my throat, with hearing all these pills come out my throat.
I went back home and a lot of things didn't work out, and I had to leave just about immediately after I got back. And I moved down to LA with the little money I had left to start pursuing some goals and dreams. I went to the VA, and they, after a few days, I was able to come down here thanks to whatever they did. And I am currently at the Salvation Army shelter right now. After getting out, without having too many or just about anyone to rely on and no finance, it became a hell of a struggle. I've dealt with this before, but going through it again is not something that I like to do, and I don't really feel like anyone should have to go through being financially unstable, homeless, and have no family or friends. And I see that with a lot of veterans. I'm a lot younger, mind you, I have my own issues, but things can go better for people. Not everyone wants to be a bum,
I've done 2 combat deployment rotations to Afghanistan, and I suffered major fatigueness while I was over there with my mental and my physical health. I was afraid to sleep with my daughter because I aggressively move around in my sleep, and sometimes I could be very violent. With all the things that occurred with me and all of those situations, it lead me up to this point, checking into a shelter. I lost my wife, my daughter.
We veterans came home eager to continue with our civilian lives, only to find ourselves enmeshed in dysfunctional pathologies that erode confidence, dampen spirits, and lead too many of us to self-destruction. It is now time for a new model, one that outreaches and assists veterans struggling with the imperative transition of veteran to civilian. And we, the new breed, with our objectives of inclusion and community, are here to fulfill it. We discovered that we were so deficient in effective foundation skills to navigate our civilian culture that we found ourselves isolated. Among us are those who got divorced, got evicted from residences, faced criminal charges, and most tragically, contemplated suicide. All of that is now remarkably changed through our meeting with and guidance from Caldwell Williams. Caldwell, who withdrew from retirement, has introduced to us to the possibility of returning home and discovering a new, purposeful, and goals-driven identity. And with our newly established skills, we are able to break previously unbroken barriers.
Combat our war inflicts invisible injury upon every participant. Those who've served and who now suffer now need to heal from their invisible wounds. To protect and to defend our homeland, our government invests great time and resources to mold.
So dealing with PTSD is something that requires a sophisticated sort of method of self-discovery to be able to. I wound up in Caldwell Williams program, and everything that they talked about was put to words the things I felt that I couldn't say. You know, the information I had gleaned, the personal insights I had, it was as if someone had already gone through it and had pieced it all together and understood how a person goes through the self-transformation discovery, this transition from having wounds into using them to become whole and complete. And that's what Caldwell Williams program does.
Our medical science community has only begun to recognize the calamity of these wounds in this, the 21st century, to mold these malleable youth into weapons of war. No less time and resources are needed to stop their self-destruction. We initiate veteran healing and self-reliance. This enables them to launch a successful civilian journey. Together, we civilians can do this.
We are the new breed, and we are going to change that. And we can't wait for you to join us.
We have found a program that is helping us heal our invisible wounds. We are willing to do the work, but we need your help. Please donate.
You are now tuned in to Fresh.
All right, welcome back to the Farron Dozier Show, Trench Talk Edition. I hope that you've enjoyed this first 90 minutes. Again, if you decide to be a guest or you choose to be a guest, these are the conversations that we have here, life before, during, and after service. Today, I've just given you a little bit of my life before service. And as we talked about in the beginning, most of us grew up in some environment where we have these complex stressors, post-traumatic, they call them, but complex. Complex is from your environment. You heard one of the gentlemen say it wasn't just his military experience. There was some things that he was dealing with before that came up later. Same here. It wasn't until my 40s that I started this journey. I'm 54. So 14 years I've been at it, peeling off these layers. All the way back to my childhood, 2-year-old decision that I made with barely having any language. Emotional. So if you want more information, you want to, find out what's going on, right there is my, Instagram at Farron Dozier. If you want to be a guest, just go there, hit me up, send me a message. I'm always open to interview people from all different eras, all different branches, children of veterans. If you have a resource that you help veterans with, you're more than welcome as well to come and share that resource. But it's our turn, right? And I've done my work. I'm still peeling off layers. Still, I just had a presentation last Thursday, labeled it shattered thoughts, and I got healing from my own conversation, sharing my story with the people at that event. I know it's difficult to want to feel that pain, but it's not pain. It's not pain. Do your research. Go to the VA. I did cognitive behavior at the VA. A lot of that education that I did a couple of years back helped me grab my thoughts. You got to understand how powerful the brain is. You got to understand that what we teach is objectification, how we objectify another person to be a terrorist or to be a color or whatever that is. And then we talk to people from those perspectives as a label. Mental health is a label, but what is after you peel off the label of mental health, what is that for you? Mine is mental toughness. Like the stuff that I'm a patient advocate. I'm not a therapist. I'm not trying to be a therapist. I'm a patient advocate. I share my story. I share my testimony of what I discovered for myself. And if other people are willing to look in their life, then you might be able to discover yours. And even with the education that we have, it's not for us to tell you what it is. It's for you to discover it. Just like when you first got balance and you learn how to walk, after all the times that your parents or your loved ones picked you up off the floor and stood you up and called you to come forward and walk to them, and you fell down and you got up, and one day you got up on your own and you've never lost that balance. Imagine that's how it feels when you discover what your emotional fractures are. Because when you discover it, no one can take that away from you. The Bible says, your truth will set you free. But you've got to figure out how to get to your truth. I was tired of pretending like I was okay. I was tired of pretending like I was fine, and I wasn't. I was 39, coming into 40, and I was just like, it's got to be a better life than this. But you have to be willing. Not everybody's willing. I pray that the best that I can do is plant these seeds and maybe soften your heart enough that you heard something for yourself, that you go and take a look for yourself and see where that's coming from. I love my mom. I love my dad, but they got on my nerve. I had to look and see, why did they get on my nerve? Guess what? It wasn't even them. It was me. It's how I viewed my mom and dad. It's the stories that I made up in my complex post-traumatic stress disorder eras. That my mom abandoned me and she doesn't love me and my dad doesn't love me. And the peer age decision. By 16, man, my life was here at 16. It went from here at 2 years old, 1 year old, and then each decision that I made about who I had to be to survive those pains got closed off. And I couldn't see nothing else but right here. And I wasn't good enough. I wasn't worth it. I wasn't smart, whatever. And then I joined the service. And if you don't think that those carry over, you heard it for yourself in some of those clips. And this is not a right or wrong, a good or bad conversation. We talk about mental toughness. We talk about mental health. We talk about emotional intelligence. We talk about all these kind of labels. Well, I'm done talking about it. I'm here to talk from it. You could talk about life or you could talk from life. And it's easy to talk about life from a victimized conversation and a victimized language, or talk from it and tell the truth about how you and why you feel the way you feel. And I know that it's difficult because our minds are already wounded from experiences and past experiences, and I don't want to be judged. Or worst case, worse than being judged is having your story being slandered. Slander. You know what slander is? Slander is when they tell your secrets and somebody takes it and tells somebody else your secrets, your deepest thoughts. So we don't want to be judged, and I definitely don't want to have my name slandered. But then who am I if I can't be who I am, or who I say that I am? Shame, embarrassment, disappointment, a diminished experience of myself, despair, self-loathing, and mine is why bother? And if it gets to why bother, then as we know, our brothers and sisters, we know those numbers. So next week, I will come back and we will talk about or talk from life during service. Whew. That's going to be something. But I hope you enjoyed it. I really appreciate you. This is the Farron Dozier Show right here on MBR. A space that they're giving veterans a voice. I don't know what else to say. I got some PSAs to play, and then I'm going to get out of here. It's been 90 minutes. Again, thanks for your time. I'll come back and say bye right after these commercial breaks. Hey, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm blessed, my brother.
I'm good, man. I'm good. Hey, did you see the game last night?
Oh, that was a good game.
But did you see the shot?
I lost money from that shot.
Oh, man, that shot was cold,
I
man.
hated it, but it was good. Damn. What's in those jeans?
You really want to know?
I do.
Exhaustion, muscle spasms, asthmatic issues, unexpected sickle cell trait crises.
Damn. Are you serious? When I was young, I found out I had sickle cell trait. My mom's told me, but I ain't have no knowledge of it. But when I got older, I had a child, and the doctor told me my daughter has sickle cell trait. Do you know the facts that both parents have sickle cell trait? There's a 50% chance the child may have the trait, and 25% chance the child may have the disease.
Hey, that's what's the count. Do you know that 2.5 million people in the United States have sickle cell trait, 300 million people globally? I didn't find out I had sickle cell trait until I was in the Army, 10 years. Next thing you know, I had a sickle cell trait exertion site.
Sickle cell? I thought that was a black gene or something.
Nah, man, the Latin community is number 2. 1 out of 36,000 babies are being born with sickle cell disease. You could be Caucasian, Mediterranean, European. You gotta know your bloodline, man.
There is an inherited gene in our community that has been forgotten. The name is sickle cell trait. WDCONSCT, also known as What's the Count, is out to bring awareness, education, and prevention to people all over the globe. Want more information? Call us now at 323-215-5384 or visit www.wdconsct.org.
Some of us still carry the burden of battle. It threatens to drown us in our everyday lives. In battle, we had our weapons and combat gear to keep us safe, to keep us confident. But when we returned home, we were not armed with weapons and gear to cope with our own minds. I was lucky to find my combat gear, my mental weapon, and it's called Calmago. Calmago is a drug-free device that allows you to achieve calm in less than 3 minutes. In moments of anxiety, stress, anger, panic, or insomnia, not with medication, but rather by activating the parasympathetic nervous system through breathing regulation and multisensory stimulation. A recent study has shown that Calmago decreases PTSD and anxiety levels in veterans, helping those who are suffering and having a long-lasting effect. Visit Calmago.com to learn how you can get Calmago through the VA or with a special veterans discount code.
Zetovia salve, made from natural and organic ingredients, good for inflammation, poor circulation, hemorrhoids, yeast infection, lip sores, dry coughs, eye pain, minor cuts and bruises, and ready to purchase at botanicaherbalco.com. 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 Do you remember studying sickle cell in biology class? What's the Count on Sickle Cell Trait Prevention is here to bring you awareness, education, and prevention conversations around the risk factors of this inherited gene. Visit WDCONSCT.org.
Muchos de nosotros nos vemos afectados por la enfermedad de células falciformes a diario y un número creciente simplemente no nos damos cuenta. Los impactos de esta enfermedad afectan a todas las personas y en especialmente a las personas de color y con antecedentes diversos. Estar en servicio conmigo y con los demás a medida que creamos una mayor conciencia sobre cómo identificar y dirigir el tratamiento de los rasgos de células falciformes y ayudar a las familias a saber cómo superar el trastorno de células falciformes. WDCONS.
Tune in to the Farron Dozier Show on KCA Radio 106.5 FM, 1050 AM, also streaming from the KCARadio.com website on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. Pacific Time. Brought to you by Sports Collective TV, Sports Collective Radio, and Sports Collective Media. We got the Heme Factor, we got In the Zone, and we got Fourth Down and the 20-second Timeout Sports segment. All for you right here on the Farron Dozier Show on KCA Radio 106.5 FM, 1050 AM, also streaming from the KCARadio.com website with my guest hosts Robert Lamar and Coach Will. Catch us on Sports Collective Media on Instagram and Facebook, and make sure you watch us Sunday nights at 8 p.m. on KCA Radio 106.5 FM, 1050 AM, also streaming from the KCARadio.com website. Music, talk, sports, and so much more. Farron Dozier Show.
I just wanna breathe this name, my God. Lift this name up high, dedicate this life, give them all we got. Testify with our hands out, I keep them up in the sky.
I just wanna praise. I just wanna praise. I just wanna praise. I just wanna praise. I made it up out of the city, avoided the hate and the gritty. Me and my little brother, my lovely mother tried to make it easy, but we was some knuckles though. We used to let them knuckles throw. We used to let them chuckles go when we thought about the places we would go. Yeah, lights off. Yeah, no, really. Lights off. Yeah, no money. Lights off. Under the candlelight.
My name is Ann Halley. I am the CEO and founder of the Rhabdomyolysis Foundation. I founded the organization in 2022 in an effort to support survivors and fund medical-related research. If you're interested in getting involved with our organization, you can visit our website at therhabdofoundation.org. You can sign up as a volunteer, or you can support our organization by donating directly on our website. And all proceeds will go to support survivors and medical research.
This is Farron from the Farron Dozier Show, 8 p.m. Pacific Time on KCAA Radio 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. Also streaming from the KCAA.com website, the station that leaves no listener behind, and MBR Radio. That's right, MBR Radio on all their streaming platforms, including MBR Radio on Roku TV, Sunday nights live, 8 p.m. Pacific Time on KCAA Radio and MBRradio.us. The Farron Dozier Show. For more information, search farrond.com.
All right, again, thank you for listening to today's episode. Life before, during, and after military service. This is my life before service. We went all the way back to the childhood ages. A lot of things I discovered about myself. 10 decisions I made in my first 40 years of my life that no wonder I thought that my mom and my dad didn't care for me, and that my peers, I couldn't trust people, the relationships that I damaged. All that stuff happened before service, right? And so I'm just saying that we've got to be able to look at that for ourselves and tell the truth. It's our turn to do the work, to break the cycle. I don't like generational curses. I learned them as generational consequences, because if we don't take responsibility for our life and forgive our ancestors and our grandparents and our parents, you carry that weight silently, emotionally. It comes out of our behavior. And we wonder why life looks the way it looks. Well, you have to understand how the brain operates, the memory patterns, the perception patterns, and the action patterns of how powerful that brain is making up stories to keep us safe and survive life. We think it's protecting us, but it's also, which it is, but it's also hurting us. So we talk about mental health, we talk about mental toughness, we talk about emotional intelligence, all that label stuff. But what does that mean to you? What does your life look like up against those principles? And so I had to get a new ideology, I had to get a new philosophy, and I had to get a new theology. Yeah, I had to go find God for myself. I had to challenge the first 40 years of my life. And then also had to figure out why do I think the way that I think? Like, I had to go and do that work myself. But the part of it was I was willing. Not everybody's willing to look. It's painful. I thought it was painful to look. But when I put myself in a conversation that I trusted, and then I was willing to use those principles up against how I felt about myself, I was able to tell the truth. I was able to discover that my perception was corrupted. My perception of myself was corrupted. My perception of my environment as a child, corrupted. Children have no concept of time in those early ages. All they know is they want your time, though. Best believe that child wants your time. But what we make it mean, what we make life mean, that brain is developing. It's giving meaning to life. So I equate my ideology to cognitive behavior, to the goaltenders platform that we talked about, where my thoughts are coming from. And I look at my ideology from this perspective. I heard this and I use this conversation. As in baseball. So if you're an athlete, if you know sports, baseball, we talk about baseball. As in baseball, the umpire calls that pitch a ball or a strike, right? So if the umpire calls that pitch a ball or a strike, no matter what the coach says, no matter what the pitcher says, no matter what the catcher says, no matter what the fans say, that pitch doesn't mean anything until the umpire calls it a ball or a strike. Imagine if you lived your life like the umpire, that you don't let nobody give meaning to your life until you give it meaning for your life. Because people have opinions, and people will come up to you with different opinions and different things and how you should do and what you should be like and all this. And yeah, you could be like, yeah, you know what? Why do you think I should act like that? Why do you think I should be like that? But at the end of the day, you're the umpire of your life, so you give the meaning that gives you power and strength, not a meaning that defeats you. Be the umpire of your life. My philosophy, now this is about airplanes. Put your mindset in the airplanes, the context of an airplane. A plane in autopilot self-corrects. You ever been on an airplane? They put it in autopilot, right? A plane in autopilot self-corrects. It's never on course. Live your life like the auto-correcting system. So what is that system that the airplanes have that when they put it in autopilot, that this system corrects the direction it's going automatically, because the plane is always, or it says never on course. But there's a system that allows that plane to get back on course and keeps it on course. What is that system that you live from that auto-corrects your behavior, that auto-corrects your attitude, that auto-corrects how you act, that has you say, oh, you know what, please forgive me, I did not mean to say that like that. Let me start over. Instead of saying, what you want to say because you got the right to say it, and then you walk away and you know that what you said was diminishing and damaging to that person, but you don't even have the courage to go back and apologize. Or what if you do apologize so much that you never change your behavior, and so now your kids don't want to talk to you, or they don't believe what you have to say because all you do is apologize, but you never change your behavior? What's your philosophy that autocorrects your character? For me, that's the Bible. That's the Holy Spirit. That was Landmark. Landmark taught me principles to what it is to be a human being, and I started to correct my attitude as a human being. And for my theology, it's the kingdom principles. And my theology statement is, as much as we are told we are social beings in the human experience, because we are social, human beings are social beings. We are naturally social. But as much as we are told we are social beings in the human experience, the Spirit has an additional conversation about this walk, and it can be alone from man, but present with God. So there's a part of you that, yes, wants to be social, but then your spirit wants to be connected to God. And that walk is by yourself. As much as we are told we are social beings in the human experience, the Spirit has an additional conversation about this walk that can be alone from man, but present with God. And I learned that from the biblical principles, the kingdom principles. So now, when my mind wants to go into those spaces of where I'm not good enough, or I'm not worth it, or I don't feel like, why am I born? Why am I here? I have 3 new principles, sets of foundation skills that I've added to my old thoughts. The old thoughts are still there. They ain't never go away. They may never go away. I may always think about myself as not being worth it or good enough. But now that I have new information, and I trust, and I know, and I've used those principles, and I've experienced myself as a greater person, as a better person, as a freeing experience of myself, now I have those 3 things in there that I could pull from. So I just take a second to think about, where's that thought coming from? Oh, that's an old thought from when I was a child. That's not who I am today. Oh, who am I being right now? Am I being angry, or can I be patient? Can I be calmness, or can I be frustrated? And ultimately, my spirit leads my life, not my subconscious mind. The biblical battle is, there's a battle between the mind and the spirit. The subconscious mind and the spirit. And they don't get along. They're not on the same page. So the more that I practice these principles and apply these to my life, I can align my soul, my mind, will, and emotions as close as possible to what my spirit believes. And the closer I get those together, the closer they live by those same principles. Sometimes you got to cut out some of the stuff that you listen to. You can't listen to 5 different things. You let your emotions live your life, or you're going to let your spirit, who wants to be free and love and share and give and be kind to people. When your subconscious mind is fractured with upset and disappointment and shame and embarrassment, you have a choice. You have a choice to get who you get to be when you show up. So this is the first episode. Next week, life during service. We're going to talk about my 24 years of military experience and how I got to be in front of you today. Shout out to what's the count. I appreciate y'all for listening and tuning in. If you want information, farrond.com, you can go there. We got banners over here. We go farrond.com right there. We got farrond.com right there. We got Sickle Cell Trait right there for more information. We got LBI Solutions somewhere down here right there. You can go to lbisolutions.com for more information and find out what we're up to as far as our veteran conversation. All right. I appreciate y'all. Shout out to what's the count.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today's show, we want to remind you that the podcast of today's episode will be available right after we go off the air. So if you missed any part of the show or want to listen again, be sure to check it out. And remember, we're here to support and honor our veterans. Your stories and experiences matter, and we are committed to giving you a platform to share them. That's right. We're here to give our veterans a voice. So don't forget to catch the podcast and stay connected with us. Giving our veterans a voice.